Now we're on the other side of the room, and you would have seen in the pan these 4 pieces, untitled Deer with Beads. They flank Patricia Brace's quilted piece, and then on my right are some of Lydia Badger's drawings. And I'd just like to start by making one connection that I think is significant in all of our works, and that is this sort of deconstruction of what used to be pretty rigorous lines of demarcation between what was considered fine art and what was considered craft or illustration. All of us take advantage of that. With Patricia, in her work I can see how the 70s feminists who made it what used to be thought of as women's work, quilting, all of a sudden that was, after that hard work in the 70s, accepted as fine art and hung on the walls of galleries and museums. And similarly, I think more recently, the language of illustration is something that those lines are being blended in an interesting way. Although there are some, it could be said that both Lydia and myself use a language that's related to the language of illustration. There are some key distinctions. One being that, of course, our work is generated out of our own thinking and process. There's not an external source. We're not illustrating a sort of finished body of work that's separate from our own. And another interesting distinction, actually, in a recent article in the New Yorker, Walton Ford was interviewed. He's a contemporary artist who also uses magnificent natural animal world in his works. And he was speaking about this distinction between illustration and fine art, and something that rings true for me that he said was that in fine art, rather than sort of creating one pathway, sort of documentation or description of something, that what most artists are trying to do is create multiple pathways. So in this work, I'm not trying to say, I want you to think this one thing or make this one association or understand one particular narrative from my life that is turning up in this work. Rather, I want to create multiple pathways. I want to create a starting place. And my hope is that the viewer is part author in that with me, bringing to the work, that viewer's own experiences and thoughts and associations that whatever imagery I've developed evokes for them. So anyway, that's one context, one lens for looking at the work that I'm doing, and sort of, I think, something that connects the 3 artists in this show. So I'll just briefly say something about the process of creating these 4 pieces, and actually these are culled from a larger body of work, but I wanted to show 3 sets of 4 pieces. And we'll finish up in the other room with the last series that I want to share with you today. These were really a challenge for me, largely because I wanted to force myself to work with a repetitive visual language. Usually for me, once I feel like I've solved a visual problem or come up with a language that's going to articulate an idea, I feel like I'm done with it and I'm on to the next thing. But I wanted to force myself to be more meditative, more contemplative in my process. And so I was able to achieve that through this process of repetition. And you'll see, both in choosing the, similar animal imagery, but also in the repetition of these sort of beaded drops, maybe drips of blood, maybe a string of beads, maybe prayer beads. My hope is that there's a number of different references that could be made. The other thing I want to mention before we move into the other room is this whole act of play that I started this discussion with. That's still at work in the creation of these pieces. How I experienced that is that it actually was incredibly difficult to give myself over to the process of drawing these droplets. What would happen is that figurative imagery would begin to emerge. I could only plan ahead so far. I wanted it to be process-oriented, but I would have to continually back my eyes up and sort of get objective about my process if I would start to see a sort of ear or face emerge. So it was this sort of game of creating a maze where There might be figurative imagery that would start to emerge, but it wouldn't get overly specific. So it was a sort of a challenge and what I experienced as a sort of active play in my studio. So that's all I'm going to say about these pieces. We're going to finish up by looking at some altered book work in the other room. We're now in the second room of the gallery, and I'd like to share the last series of work that's in this show, and it's an altered book series. These are a series of 4 altered books. Each is called The Atlas of American Wars, Book 1, 2, 3, and 4. I'll just introduce this work by saying that for many years I've worked with altered books. These are both altered books and artist books. What I've done in the past is taken books that are falling apart. I've worked with a number of them, taken them apart and used the individual pages as a drawing surface. Usually the formalizing step when I've worked with books in this way is to cull from a large series of drawings done on book pages and then to frame them in a grid of 10, 20, or 30, depending on the book. I've worked a little differently with this series. As you can see, I was really interested in taking a book, deconstructing it, and then totally transforming it into another book. And you'll see that each book is sort of within a hanging structure, which actually can come out, and the pages can be flipped through. And each book has 4 pages, each with a different suit from playing cards. And then you'll see that each of these sort of cases for the books can actually slide into its book cover. And all of this has been hand-stitched. And one of the things, sort of magical moments of artistic process, is couldn't figure out how I wanted to formalize the cover of the books, and it wasn't until I'd finished stitching these, hand-stitching these with red thread, that I made the connection to the red beads of maybe blood falling from the deer hooves in the other room. So there are those sort of magical connections and repetitions that happen in art practice. So again, I don't want to over-explain these books to you, but clearly each original page, it may be kind of hard to see on the video, but each original page is essentially a mapping of military strategy of American wars. And I've taken apart that book and sort of playfully using them to other ends, and using this sort of military language with language from playing cards. Obviously, this whole idea of using play to speak to serious matters also carries over to this work. Again, maybe I'll just flip through one more so that you can get a sense of how the different suits are dealt with. Each page is drawn individually. There's a strong relationship between each page, but each is a different suit and each is a slightly different drawing. Again, we spoke earlier about this idea of repetition, and that's a tool that I'm using in this work. And again, sort of torturing myself, making myself use repetition in a way that doesn't come naturally to me. And I've been pleased with the results when I've sort of fit myself into that box. So, in conclusion, I hope that you've enjoyed the presentation, and in our threaded discussion, I'd love to hear your thoughts on the work, any questions that you have, but I'd also like you to be thinking about the development of your own study plan in terms of creating a set of obstructions or restrictions within which to ask your most important driving questions. And I look forward to your thoughts. Thank you.